This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com. This show is brought to you by IndyWrestling.us. Check out IWC, RWA, and more. And listeners like you, support this show at patreon.com/Wrestling Mayhem Show.
Hungry as fuck, but I ain't starving yet. Chain for the pain, cocktail dog set. Never said I was a gangster or thug, but I'm an animal. Feeding for the taste of the fly.
Hey guys, it's the Indy Mayhem Show. I'm Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on Twitter here in the Sorgatron Media Studios in Pittsburgh, PA. And this is the show where we talk with people in and around independent professional wrestling, having a lot of great stories, learning a lot about people old and new in the business. And we're going to do a lot of history today, I believe, in Pittsburgh wrestling. So, of course, please check out everything at WrestlingMayhemShow.com, IndyWrestling.us. You can find out past episodes of this, other great wrestling podcasts, as well as a lot of the people that we talk to on the show are featured over on a lot of those shows and on the shows over at IndyWrestling.us and IndyWrestling.network, including our guest today. You can drop us a line at goodtimes@WrestlingMayhemShow.com or 412-206-WMS0 if you have any questions for any upcoming guests that we do have announced over on our Facebook pages, or if you have any suggestions on who we should talk to in the future. Again, we can't watch all the independent professional wrestling. It's hard to watch all of WWE at this point. But if there's anybody you think we're missing out on that we need to have a conversation with, let us know on any of those platforms. So my guest today, I'm really excited, and I've been trying to get on here for a couple months now, and of course scheduling has been really crazy. But I've always heard about this tag team called The Wrong Crowd, and I may have seen The Wrong Crowd. I know I've seen The Wrong Crowd at least once at a benefit show at the Ross River Ice Gardens. And I was like, well, who are these guys? Myself only watching independent professional wrestling since 2006. I've only watched a couple of groups. And then I probably about a year ago, I think I found myself in The Wrong Crowds because I found myself working with one Paul Atlas. That's joining me here today. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good. How's it going, sir?
Good. So, like I said, this is exciting for me because I don't know much about your history. I'm like, hey, who is this? I don't know who Paul Atlas is on commentary when we first started working together, right? Yeah. And then the more I learned from you was actually your conversations with Jim LaMotta as you're providing color for these matches and everything. And you do touch on your history here and there on that.
And that's actually only the history from the 2000s. It actually goes all the way back to the late 90s. And yes, I am that old.
Yeah, as I've been discovering, we'll talk about a little bit here, but I've been digging a little bit of the archives here, and also if you guys are on a video with us over here, I do have a little bit. I've been digging up here with the PWX TV from. I think this is marked as let's see, does it say 1998? I believe this. You're on the right in this image. This might be your image for the podcast when I post this later. Giving an interview, and this was some kind of a 6-man tag action against Webb.
Yes, that was Tarantula, Devious, and the Mauler.
And Tarantula is another one that I've only seen recent years at KSWA. So, but always like you and Tarantula are always names that I've heard, like from the Shirley Does and everybody else, like the Jesse the Marks guys I've known in the Pittsburgh area too. So, well, let's roll it back a little bit. Okay. I always throw some icebreakers out there for people who maybe don't know you. So, what was your earliest memory of professional wrestling?
My earliest memories of professional wrestling. Well, I was the son of an Italian immigrant. So that meant studio wrestling in the 70s. Bruno Sammartino, Dominic DeNucci, Bill Cardille, that whole space. And every Saturday, when I was down at my grandparents' house, it would be on and we would be watching, and he would take me to the live matches, and I mean, he was a steel worker, so it was very blue collar, and I kind of fell in love with the whole thing of it. And then as I grew older, I wanted to find a way to get into it. And a lot of people will talk about the love for wrestling, which I have, and I always have had, but it's also an addiction. You know, there's that old adage that it's kind of like the mob. Once you're in, you never get out. So that's kind of where I fell into, you know. So I watched all the, all the WWEF whatever products at the time. And then in the late 80s, with the advent of cable television, of course, we were able to catch in syndication the NWA shows. And as much as I loved the WWE product at the time growing up, as I got a little older, you kind of fell in love with the NWA product because it seemed so much more real. I mean, the people were like, they were people. It was like, this is really happening.
It seemed more competitive versus like WWF was probably leaning towards the cartoonish.
Correct. Yeah. Point. Yeah. At that time when cable came about and NWA started coming up north, so to speak, with the TBS programs, and they even had the syndicated programs that they showed, the worldwide wrestling and things like that. But it just seemed so much more real. You could get more invested in the product because it was like, wow, that's really happening. Then in about 1990, of course, you always had the after mags because we didn't have the internet back then.
And that's the Bill Apter magazines, like because I had this with Shirley Doe because he always mentioned them on the one show we did, and I was like, what's an after mag? I'm like, oh, Bill Apter.
Yes.
So that's like your Pro Wrestling Illustrated and things like
that. That was our internet. You had to go and get the magazines and you look
black and white newsprint.
Yes,
and,
occasional color photography, color photographs.
Nice color spread in the middle.
And so I knew some of the NWA names. Even though back then nobody crossed over and mentioned. When an NWA guy would come to WWF, they never would get into his history.
Who's this hot rookie?
Yes, he just came out of nowhere.
Who's this hot rookie Harley race?
Exactly. There was never any mention of their history because that's the way it was done back then. The people up north knew Northern wrestling, the people down south knew Southern wrestling. So you knew them from the magazines, and then they would come in. And one particular magazine had this ad in it for people looking to find people who wanted to become professional wrestlers. Okay, I do. So I gave the number a call. He gave me an address. You had to go get it on a map back then. No GPS, no whatever. So when I drove to the area, it was in an extremely horrible part of town. And I looked around and I said, nah, this probably isn't a good idea. And I left. So, and apparently someone else who had seen the same thing, the same article, must have did the same thing, but I guess he made contact with this person and said, look, you're not who you say you are. I am looking for people. I want your numbers. I don't know if he threatened his life or whatever he did. So I get a phone call, and the guy says, hey, I hear you answered this ad. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. If you're him, I really don't think. He says, no, I'm not him. He said, I want you, if you're still interested, I want you to meet me, at this shopping center, and I will take you to a legitimate professional wrestling school. So at that point, I'm kind of like, but my love to get into the business kind of overshadowed my common sense at that point. And I said, sure, why not? Again, no internet, no nothing.
Which is the usual formula for people that get into pro wrestling.
Exactly. So, it's like, okay, I don't know anything about this guy. There's, again, no internet. You can't look it up and go, oh, yeah, this guy's legit. It's like, okay, I might be going to meet an axe murderer. I don't know, but I want to be a wrestler, damn it.
Speaking of which, I think an axe murderer just got in the chat room.
Yeah. So I met him, and I followed him out to this community center, and we went into the community center, and lo and behold, there's a wrestling ring. There are people training to be wrestlers, and that's where I met Joe Perry and Sean Patrick, who were kind of like the people at the time around the Pittsburgh area. Mark Hildebrand, Mark Curtis, he was the WCW referee. He was involved with them.
Very big in the 90s.
Yes.
If you watched the Nitro era, the NWO, a lot of people remember or grew up on these days, that he was very prominent in that. So.
Yes, he was a referee for them at that time, but he also started out as a wrestler. So and him and Sean Patrick used to do these gimmicky matches, the Orange Dynamo against the Ninja Turtle kind of things,
And Sean Patrick, that's the current KSWA ref, right?
Yes, yes. Sean has been around even longer than I have, and Sean is.
There's another guy I don't know his history.
He's the greatest. He's the greatest ref to work with in the world. Even for an old guy like an older vet like me, it's like if you have a brain fart in the middle of the match, you just look over at Sean and he'll say, "This looks like a really good time to do this." Thank you, Sean. Yeah.
Always a fun guy. I like seeing at the shows.
Yes. Yeah. He's put a lot of time and a lot of his life into the business. So, so I began training there. Myself, another guy at the time, his name was Scott Wilcox. He was from the area as well. He actually went and was doing some Memphis stuff in the early 90s. He actually took over the Humongous role for a while down there in USWA.
Humongous?
Yes, Lord Humongous. The
Lord
original.
Humongous. Okay.
Yeah, the original Sid Vicious role.
Oh, okay.
So they kind of, because of the hockey mask, obviously, all you needed was a guy with muscles, and he could be him. So he kind of did that. And so we began training, and it was funny because it was July the 3rd, 1990. Went in there, and they're like, "Okay, you want to be a wrestler? Let's show you a couple things." And they're like, "Hey, we've got this little thing we're doing tomorrow at this state representatives picnic. You want to be on it?" Okay. So I began my training on the 3rd of July and wrestled my first match on the 4th of July.
Wow.
And it was...
And by the way, like, I know training today, like, these kids are at least a year.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
There really is. Because that match was horrible. Believe me. I think I threw 30 clotheslines because that's really all I knew.
They were just desperate for bodies at that point.
They needed them, yes. Because at this time, in 1990, the territories had all just died.
Yeah.
They were either run out of business or bought up between Vince and Crockett as far as he could go before he sold to Turner. There was really no indie wrestling at that particular time. These shows were almost like the Outlaw shows kind of became indie wrestling.
Okay.
Over the years.
Okay.
So, because like I said, there was no more territories.
They just kind of filled the space as the territories disappeared and fell through.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's kind of the infancy of indie wrestling. And it wasn't even really as popular then. So, I mean, you may go 3-6 months in between doing anything, and there wasn't places to train in between. I mean, sometimes there were, it just depended, and I remember we were doing a show, I think it might have even been somewhere in this area, maybe, I want to say Baldwin or something like that at the gymnasium, and it was Dominic DeNucci was on the show. Now, I had already been working for about a year, and Joe, of course, was involved, Sean was involved, Dr. Sam Siegel, he just recently passed away. The doc was tremendous heel manager, was on the show as well, and so was Dominic DeNucci, and he got a hold of Sam after watching the matches, and he spoke of my match in particular, and a couple other guys. So Sam got a hold of Joe. Joe got a hold of me and said, "Hey, Dominic is still running his school out in Freedom, PA. It was an old schoolhouse. And Dominic wants to know if you'd be interested in coming out." Shit, yeah, be interested in coming out. I mean, again, I was a grandson of an Italian immigrant. Dominic was the man next to Bruno. So here we go. Okay, yeah, sure. Give me the address. I'll be there. And I met with Dominic, and we talked business. And I said, he said, "Come on out. You can come out. We train here every week." And the ring was literally in a classroom. So there was no coming off the top rope. You hit the ropes, you hit the brick wall. So you learn to wrestle and you learn to polish your wrestling. And that's from there is where, things got a little bit, you still may have went 3-6 months in between different things, but now the indies were slowly starting. And that's actually where I met Tarantula. He was there at Dominic's school at that time. And, just slowly progressed from there and kind of learned the business end a little bit better, learned how to protect yourself in the ring in case you ran into any shady characters, which you never really find in wrestling.
No, not at all.
And I kind of became a more polished performer at that time, because this was just shortly after Shane had been there, Mick Foley had been there.
Shane Douglas.
Yes, Shane Douglas. And we went from there, and then...
So this is the same school that we hear about if you read Mick Foley's book, coming to the Pittsburgh area, training
Yes.
with Shane Douglas.
Yep. Yeah, it was out in Freedom, Pennsylvania. Like I said, it was an old schoolhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and he had the ring in a classroom. So you learn you learn more of the technical end with Dominic, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course it was a much different style back then anyway. Not a lot of what goes on today. And I have no problem whatsoever. Everything has to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So I get this. Everybody, they should go back to the old school ways. Yeah, no. You know what I mean? Everything has to evolve, or it's going to die off eventually.
Yeah, and there's a place for that too, and an appreciation. Yes. And I think that's the nice thing now is there are so many versions of professional wrestling, right?
Yes, there are.
Jake is doing part of my interview for me here in the chat room. He says, Paul, what's an outlaw show for those that don't know?
Okay. Yeah, that's the old guy there, huh? Outlaw shows used to be ones that came into a territory and tried to run shows. And, I made the mob reference earlier, and that was literally, they would go after them like a mob. There would be they would call out a hit on these people, so to speak. So they were kind of like, they were shows that just popped up out of nowhere. They didn't belong in the territory.
There was no state athletic commission licensing as much then, or?
I'm not sure about that part of it, but originally, one thing that you never did is you never went into somebody else's territory.
Right.
Whether you were an established territory or you were an outlaw, you're not supposed to cross over into someone else's. Everybody, the line of demarcation was drawn in stone.
And these were regions. Like we talk about like the Northeast region, the Midwest, the Deep South, things like that, right?
Yes. And nobody crossed over. Just like, the old NWA territories. Nobody. The only person who would really cross between territorial lines was the NWA champion, because he worked for the company,
right,
not for one particular promotion.
Right.
So that's what Outlaw Show was. It was just basically that. It was a group of individuals just impeding on someone else's territory when they should not have been.
Whereas today it's more all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Pittsburgh area alone. You've got how many?
Look at South Pittsburgh.
How many companies that run the same basic area? That would never have happened. That would never have flown back then.
Yeah.
One would have taken over the territory and the rest would have been run out of town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Also, I think we need to mention Tarantula. He's been brought up a couple of times here. Tarantula is a very large biker type of person. It's probably the biggest thing I can describe him as. And I know. One thing I has noted. I think maybe Jake Garrett or somebody mentioned. I believe Tarantula can be seen during the ECW speech in Beyond the Mat, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Like he's in that group there that night. So. Just a little background there. Look him up. You'll find a lot of stuff. T.Rantula. And
T used to do a lot of different things with a lot of the different. He did some things with WCW, WWF. I mean, I've done some myself, but he's probably done just a little. I never made it branched out into the WCW part of it. But T has a bit of a history. I mean, a good history as far as where he's been.
So getting into it, so we're getting to, the early mid-90s. You're well into pro wrestling at this point. We know that, at least here in the Pittsburgh area, we start seeing more kind of wrestling TV pop up again. It's the advent of ECW probably around that era too. How is that, Pittsburgh pro wrestling scene kind of changing as we're going through the 90s and you're going along with it?
Well, at the time, just before the birth of PWX, there was Steel City Wrestling, Norm Connors, and he ran the spot shows mainly and things of that nature. And then once you get up until about 1995, 96, that's when, again, I got a call from Joe Perry. He said, hey, there's an upstart coming on. You might want to check it out. So okay. Yeah, so I gave me the address again. We found and that's where PWX had actually started to begin its journey at the Eastland Mall out in North Versailles. It was run out of a candy store basically that Jim Miller had. It was his business, and Sean Evans, great guy, I miss Sean a lot every day. I guess basically came to Jim and said, hey, I want to do this wrestling thing. And Jim was like, I don't know about this. But he kind of fell along with it. and they began running it. They first started running it outside of the candy store in the main part of the mall.
Really?
Yeah, like in the corridor type of the mall. And they began running their shows, and they were running them there about every other week. So it was like, this is a good thing. There's work to be had now. And then eventually we moved into the store itself, into the back of the store. Was kind of like an old storeroom area. And at that point, he had asked myself and Brian Anthony, because originally he had a gentleman by the name of B.A. Briggs was doing his training. When B.A. left the area, he asked us if we wanted to take over the training. So, yeah, sure, why not? So we began to do the training. We were doing shows twice a month. And then eventually from there, the TV end of it started to come into effect, and that's where now you began to get the exposure, obviously, because now you're doing your products on TV. And
this is, I don't know if that's as big of a deal to get on television these days, but I mean, that was like, I flip through my channels, I find WWF, I find WCW, maybe ECW, and then you guys are right beside it, basically.
Right. Yeah. We were actually, I believe we were sandwiched in between Sunday Night Heat and ECW.
Oh, wow.
So that was it was like 1 a.m, but it was still, you were in that block there. So if you were watching Sunday Night Heat, it was actually Shotgun Saturday Night, I'm sorry, because it was on a Saturday. They put on that show, and then if you wanted to see ECW, we were right in between there.
Yeah.
So, that gave a lot of good exposure to guys. The clip that you had up of the Wrong Crowd with the web, that was actually on the television show. That was the broadcasters, that was part of the TV at that time, and a lot of guys got a lot of good exposure out of that. I mean, yeah, sure, it was just local, but it was funny because, we eventually, PWX kind of had a official working relationship with WWE. Jim had actually been to Titan Towers. I was there with him. He talked some stuff over with Cornette, and we actually brought in, at the time, we joined the NWA, which was going through WWE at that time.
And this is, what era is this? The still late 90s?
This is 1998, 98. Yeah.
Okay.
And we brought in Dan Severin, who at the time was the NWA champ. And Dan and I actually worked the match for television, for PWX television. And I believe somebody mentioned the clip of, there was a photo recently on social media of the outdoor show we did, King of the Ring.
Yeah, this was Brandon Kay had reposted it. It was looked like it was in the parking lot of the Igloo, the Civic Arena.
Yes, it was.
Before the the infamous King of the Ring that Mick Foley's Hell in a Cell match was.
Yep.
So.
And then we subsequently went in because they invited us to come in to watch the show as well, and we ran into Dan, and Dan. He said, "Hey, yeah, come on down." We were down in catering, hanging out and stuff. And it was funny because he was saying he had mentioned that I believe the match with him and I had aired a few days prior to that event. And some of the boys were actually like, "Hey, we seen you on this little local TV show." So they were even noticing it at the time. So it was kind of cool, kind of a big deal to be doing TV back then. And you're right. That was a big deal because again, there was no live streaming, pay-per-views, nothing of that nature. So to be on TV at that time, even in something that small,
that was the gateway.
That was it. Yeah. That opened up the doors for a lot of other, opportunities and a lot of opportunity to be seen. So that was really a big deal back then. And we had the Wrong Crowd gimmick going on, and it was kind of funny because you do what you got to do to stay as relevant as you can during your time and whatever. And Jim actually went back at one point. He went back and went through the shows, and he says, he come up to me, he says, who the person who was seen on our television show was the most? I said, no, he says, it was you. I was like, wow, that means people really wanted to, and I was one of the top heels, obviously. So it was like, to me, it was like, wow, people must really want to see me get my ass kicked. Because I must be that arrogant.
And that's the goal, right?
Exactly what it is. You know,
Totally.
so to even hear something like that, you know, that at that particular time you were that relevant in the business, even it be on a small stage like that, it was really a cool thing.
You know, obviously this connection with WWE, they've heard about this. Like, it was a lot different that there was, and maybe we're coming back to this. We're kind of seeing the NXT evolve, you know, kind of things, and more acknowledgement of the indies on that platform. But you know, what kind of opportunities did this kind of create for you? Did you get any dark matches with WWE or anything like that?
Yes, it really it did. I did a couple of matches down at the Igloo. We actually did a 2-night stint of Raw and SmackDown in Buffalo and Rochester, New York. So yeah, it opened it up. We did not just dark matches, but there was which WrestleMania was it? I think it was 15. The Kane Triple H China thing, and myself and Brian Anthony were actually the paramedics for the fireball gimmick that they did that night. You know, we ran to the ring.
So you were on WrestleMania. You had a WrestleMania.
Well,
moment.
it wasn't on WrestleMania. It was on a Raw prior at the
okay.
Igloo.
Okay.
And they did a fireball gimmick where Kane went to shoot a fireball out of his hand. You know, that was after we got it reloaded in Gorilla because he set it off.
Well, we have established, because you know, a lot of our friends were part of that Batista security force, and that played on WrestleMania. So therefore, your promo probably
did. Yeah. So yeah, yes, I was on WrestleMania.
So
then if you go that way,
there you go.
Yeah, he shot the fireball and it hit China.
Yeah.
You know, and China went down. And the paramedics run to the ring, and
it's got to be scary that the wrong crowd is your paramedics for that evening.
Exactly.
You're gonna be like, oh, I think we're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. The ones your mother warned you about. What's the advent of that gimmick is actually kind of funny. The name actually came from a book. Brian Bosworth, the Boz. He had a book out about his life at the time. It was called Confessions of a Modern Day Anti-Hero. And he talks about, I believe it was the Orange Bowl, where they went up against Penn State. And he talked about how, you know, Penn State, they get off the plane and, you know, they're all in suits and, you know, ties and looking very businesslike. And here's the guys from Oklahoma in cut off camo shorts and muscle tanks. And he said, you know, we were the wrong crowd, the ones your mother warned you about. And we were like, that's it right there. So yeah, if the wrong crowd's saving you, there's a problem there. So
that's great. So let's talk a little bit more about the tag team. You guys were pretty much an established tag team much through the mid-90s on through, right?
Yeah, well, Brian and I were a tag team throughout most of our careers leading up to PWX. And then we stayed the tag team. It was kind of an off and on thing. Then we had one of the guys we trained, his name was Jimmy Angel, and we brought him in to work with us. It kind of fell into our laps, so to speak, because we were going through a period of time on TV where the booking was like, I'm not sure if they knew what we were going to do or how we were going to do things. So it was like kind of like, okay, well, first you guys are going to be with each, you know, you and Brian are going to be with each other. Well, now maybe you won't be with each other. And then, you know, Jimmy's your student, Paul, and you guys are going to like kind of have.
Is Jimmy this third one that I'm seeing in this match?
Yeah, he's in the white trunks.
Okay, and I think we have it up here if you guys are with us on video.
And he kind of fit in with us, you know, the look. It was actually, you know, everybody thought he was a legitimate brother of one of us, you know, because it was kind of funny when his mom died. We were at the funeral, and I guess somebody came up behind me and said, you know, I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not Jimmy, sorry, but thank you anyway. So one night they decided to put the three of us together, and kind of a little bit of frustration of, you know, they're not really doing much with us. So he said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out dressed alike, and we're just going to pop off and be us, you know. And we did that, and the crowd bit on it, hook, line, and sinker. So then we just evolved it from there. You know, we had the jean jackets and cut-off jean shorts with the airbrush on it, you know, and we would come out and we would do
very,
this.
very hot in the 90s, by the way.
Yes, it was. Yeah. It was all custom done, you know, so to speak. Yeah, you just went to the mall and found the airbrush guy.
Yeah.
But it was custom gear. So that's what you need in this business, custom gear. And we would do different kinds of entrances. You know, maybe Jimmy would come from the actual entranceway and we'd come from the back of the store kind of thing. We did a thing, one of the first outside of radio endeavors that Bubba the Bulldog had. He had like a nightclub type thing, and we held a show there. And we found a service elevator that went right up to the area where we were at. And we come up in the service elevator, and we would come out.
So this is, you know, we have a lot of conversations with the Rev Ron Hunt about his entrances. He always has these innovative entrances he tries to figure out. But you guys were doing that back then.
Yeah, we were doing that back then, and we would do this, you know, weird, you know, we'd almost like a, you know, striptease type thing with our shorts and our, you know, and our jackets, and it would piss off the crowd royally. So, and there used to be a group that would sit in the, if you were looking from the video, that hard cam that came from the entranceway, I believe they were off to the left-hand side of the ring. And few of the guys actually got into the business. Scotty Gash was one of them. They would actually, and again, this isn't, you know, this is before the advent of the internet and things were so readily available. They would literally take and go by poster board and go out and get magazines and find pictures of male models and cut them out and post them to us and, you know, make fun of our sexuality, you know, and
it was the 90s.
Yes. And it's like, when you can have that kind of control over a crowd with your gimmick, it's astounding. I mean, they would do this every single time. You know, we actually started making them part of the act, so to speak, because it's like, hey, you want to be part of the show, so be it, man. Yeah. You know, so it went on from there. And then again, everything runs its course, so it had to run its course. Jimmy decided to leave the business. He was actually the oldest of us at the time. He was in his 40s. You know, he decided that, you know, I've done it. I'm good. I'm off, you know. We just all suddenly, you know, we all went off and started doing our own thing after that at that point in time. So yeah, it's like everything else, it runs its course. But for the time we had it, it was probably from late 97 till about mid 99 was really our first run as the Wrong Crowd. And I wouldn't trade that time for anything. It was great.
So, you know, over that time, of course, you, as you're saying, you're getting people's attention. You're pushing buttons with the crowd. Are there any instances that things got pretty crazy? You got maybe too much of a reaction out of anybody out there?
It stayed pretty calm for the most part. I mean, there was nothing where, you know, we didn't have to fight off any marks or any fans or anything like that. But we could pretty much incite a crowd very easily, you know, and I think people enjoyed that at the time, you know, because like I said, too, you know, if they were there enough, like these guys that used to sit in the corner, we kind of made them part of the act. So they just kind of like, okay. One thing that got kind of a little crazy with that group, and Scotty would tell me this years later, we always used to do a thing where if the crowd was getting on us enough, we would just walk out. You know, we're going to the back. We don't need this. Screw it. You know, and then of course the ref would do the 10 count. And we'd come back out before the 10 count. And the group used to try to legitimately make us not come back out. They thought they could they wanted to get under our skin so bad that we literally walked out. Yeah. And every time they thought they did it, we're standing behind the curtain and we're laughing our asses off because we knew what they were doing, you know, and then we'd come back out, son of a bitch. And they'd try to get more and more intense with, you know, I don't know that they crossed any lines, but it got pretty. If you didn't have a thick skin, you know, they got pretty out there with it sometimes in trying to make us just walk off stage, so to speak. You know, and we knew that was part of the performance, and we sucked them in with it every time.
Matt Tress was in the chat room, and he wants me to ask you about the epic Sideshow pizza promo. Tell me about the side.
Oh,
is this online anywhere? Is this floating around?
It was shown on PWX TV, I believe.
I'm sure I have it in the archive somewhere.
Yes. Then this is the kind of heat we used to get back then. And sometimes I look back and I think, wow, man, I really probably did some shit that I shouldn't have done. SCW, Steel City Wrestling. Norm had been working with PWX for a while. And the way that kind of came about is Lou Marconi, who was a wrestler out of the Ohio area, was a friend of mine. I'd been on some shows with him. And we had some people who had left PWX at the time, and we needed some bodies. So I called Lou, and he had a partner. His name was Frank Stiletto. And I asked them if they would come in and do some PWX shows. And Lou was like, yeah, sure, but I just want to clear it with Norm because you're in the Pittsburgh area. Like, yeah, no problem. So that's how Norm started to work with PWX. Actually took over the booking for a while, and him and Jim had a falling out, and he went back off to do Steel City Wrestling, and they used to do it at a place, I believe it's in Irwin, with Sideshow Pizza. And we got this great idea that we were going to go to Sideshow Pizza and film a promo, basically making fun of the venue and subsequently the wrestling. And we were in there and we were playing the games and all this. And we actually got one of the workers to admit that the wrestling was pretty crappy on the promo. It was like, and we played it on, I believe we played it on a television show. So that was, yes, that was the infamous, it wasn't really an invasion as much more as it was we're going to make as much fun of you as we can.
Referee Bobby Williams had it on tape. Now if somebody can tell me what episode that is, I feel like I might have seen something like that when I was scanning through the tapes.
Because we had it was Brian, Jimmy, and myself, and JB Destiny was actually doing the camera work, but we kept calling him. We had the fourth member, who was our head of security. It was Big. Okay, but we played off like Big was the guy behind the camera. You know, we parked our car in a handicap spot. You know, like we're the wrong crowd. We don't care. You know. And we went, like I said, we went through and we were playing games and we were making fun of things. And the best part of it, we didn't even plan it. You know, we talked to one of the workers. Said, yeah, the wrestling's really not that great. It's like, good.
Matt's saying this is DX going to WCW before its time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we were, we're pretty much knocking on the garage door saying, let us in.
This spot is reserved for the wrong crowd, says Bobby. Oh, that's great. We're going to have to definitely dig that up and see if we can post that somewhere here. And I should mention some of these clips that you see. We're digging through some of the archives. Obviously, PWX, a lot of the old stuff is part of the Pro Wrestling Network that we've been working with lately, and that's where some of these matches have been coming from that we've been putting on the PWX Media YouTube, on the PWX Network Facebook page. Again, just kind of resurfacing because nobody's seen this stuff for so long.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, everybody talks about the history of Pittsburgh wrestling, but nobody gets a chance to see it unless you're Bobby Williams with his tape out there. His VHS, his degrading VHS.
I don't even think I have my tapes of the programs anymore. So
right.
God bless them, man.
I mean, so many, or DVDs that don't work from the 2000s and stuff like that. There's so many guys out there that have their, careers out there. So it's a little bit of indie wrestling liberation, I think. To get that out there in front of people.
Like I said before, I know everything has to evolve, but you shouldn't forget the past either.
No.
There were so many guys that laid the groundwork for what we've got going on here today.
Speaking of evolution, let's jump ahead a little bit. You're still involved. You are an authority figure with Fight Society, which is kind of the evolution of what PWX is. Talk to me a little about that, and also I want to talk a little bit about your shift into commentary as well. Sure,
yeah. Well, in 2015. I've had knee problems for a while. Obviously, from the business. I mean, I've been an athlete since I was 7 years old. So, I was developing some severe arthritis in my left knee, and it got to the point where my orthopedist told me he couldn't really do anything about it. The only thing left to do was to do a total knee replacement, which he didn't do, but he gave me a name of another good, very good surgeon. He was actually called the guy who fixes others' mistakes. So I went in, and just after my 50th birthday, I had my knee replaced. Well, now I'm done. I can't necessarily work anymore. That's obvious. So I was out of the business probably for close to a year, and I got a message on social media, on Facebook, from Classic Chris Helmsley, that he had pitched an idea to Quinn Magnum about a mentor type thing, and he wanted me to do it. And would I be interested? So, of course, old school Paul Atlas, the first thing I did was message Quinn. Do you know anything about this? Because sometimes people just come up with these ideas and they just want to do them. He's like, yeah, we talked a bit about it. I said, so you're on board? He said, well, yeah, we'd love to have you back. So I said, okay, so I'll do it. So I came back and I was doing that for a little while. And then I was helping out in the back, helping out with the booking end and helping out with, getting the shows together and things like that. And we were sitting around and we're kind of thinking, again, things got to evolve, and, PWX has been around for so long, and it's like, what can we do to do things differently, to kind of, and we were getting a lot of heat because of the building and where it's located and things like that. So Quinn came up with the idea of, let's embrace it rather than fight it. We're in a crappy part of town and a rundown building. Let's be this underground fight club, for lack of a better term. It's like, yeah, I think that'll work. So we actually did this big thing on the last show of, I believe it was of that year, 2016, I want to say, that, we pretty much did the last match and all the champions came out and laid their belts in the center of the ring. And then myself, Crusher Hansen, and Ron the Beast Williams came out. And in the entranceway, there used to be the PWX. And we each grabbed a letter off the wall and we put it in that pile and basically said, right now, PWX is gone and dead. And we're going to come back as this fight society. So we needed, of course, some authority figures. Everybody knows Quinn is the head guy at PWX. So Ron, at the time, was going to be like the commissioner. And then we needed like a director. I said, okay, well, you can do that. And yeah, I'll do that because, my limitations in the ring are very...
Is it Director of Chaos, I believe?
I am the fight director.
You're the fight director.
And it was the Commissioner of Chaos.
Commissioner of Chaos.
Yes. So those were the titles, and we were... I think Quinn came up with those two roles for one big reason, is he hates going out there anymore. So it was like, you guys get to go out and do all the setup promos because I don't want to do it. All right, we'll do it. I may not be able to do much physically, but I can still talk, damn it. So that's kind of how that all came about, in the evolution of Fight Society. And of course, unfortunately, we lost Ron, and then Dean had stepped into that commissioner role. So that's kind of where the Fight Society came about.
Which did not end your time in the ring, it seems. As I have a clip online on the Fight Society social media of the bloodiest match, and we can say this Fight Society history because it's only a couple year history right now. You and Chris Helmsley here, which. Man, this is... Listen, I am not a fan these days of death matches, and for these reasons. But this was like I'm editing this thing, and Missy, my wife, was sitting here, and I'm just like, it's still going, it's still coming out, it's dripping, this is crazy. So not for the faint of heart if you guys are on video with us right now. What happened?
I wish I knew, to be honest with you. Believe me, that was not planned.
Okay, so there was like a moment in the match. You hit him in the head with a lens,
Yes.
like a camera lens,
Yes.
right? And it looked like a pretty standard hit, and he just...
I don't know how the hell. The backstory behind it was Chris had started to push back against authority, so to speak, feeling he was being taken advantage of by management, and we came up with the PWX Contenders title, which would be kind of, I don't want to say money in the bank, but would guarantee the owner a one-time shot at the heavyweight
I take it kind of
championship.
like the gift of the gods on Lucha Underground, like that kind of
something
title
like
that
that,
leads to the
because
next
you had
title,
to you had to be awarded a badge to get into the match,
yeah.
And things like that. And the night he won that title, Dean and I, as the authority figures, so to speak, and Quinn don't want to go out there anymore. We go out and we present him with the belt, and he attacks me, and Dean comes down and he gets one up on Dean. So we were going to say, okay, where can we go with this? I said, well, maybe we can do a match of some sort. Mm-hmm. And then just after that, my right knee started giving me trouble. So I went in and they were going to have to do a scope on it. So that's where we came up with, he attacks the leg, obviously. Now I got to have surgery, and I love the fact that it fell on Ron's memorial show. I really do, because I think it made it special. But we did a promo prior to that where the PWX photographer, Curtis Stevenson, he's my legit best friend in real life. And he was also my manager for a while in the 2000s. Chris wanted promo shots. Come on in, let's do my promo shots. And he attacks Curtis, breaks his camera, leaves him laying. So, he's trying to make this as personal as possible. Which, the crowd's like, oh man, you screwed up now, dude. You went after his best friend, you're done. So we had an old camera lens to say this is his camera lens, that was broken. And we did Curtis comes down from the front, I come down from the back and attack him from behind. Yeah. Pick up the camera lens and I go, and I hit him with it. I did not hit him that hard. But for some reason, it must have caught legit a spot on his head. I don't know if he's got a soft spot on his head or what, but maybe his brain's not, or his skull's not fully developed. I don't know.
He's like a little baby.
Yes. It hasn't fully developed yet. And it was gushing before he hit the mat. Mm-hmm. And when he stood up, the first thing I thought of was, shit, I killed him. Well, at least it's going to look good.
Yeah. Apparently a little too good.
And it wouldn't stop. But and the sad part is as messed up and as, people, oh my God, that's gross. And this, I think it added to the match, to believe it or not. I mean, it added to that, like, this is a real battle between these two guys.
And it does. And we don't get that, for obvious reasons, whether it be, commission and just safety, knowing more now. But I mean, that it did happen more or less accidentally. Yeah.
It was 100%. It was not planned in any way, shape, or especially to that degree. Yeah.
So, my producer Missy's coming over. Do you have something to add here? I was in the locker room. Yeah. No. Go over to that mic over there. Just at least pop on there. So she's got some background on this.
Yeah, Missy was there filming.
You should be live. You should be live.
So I was in the locker room after this match, and Paul walks in, and he's covered in blood, like absolutely covered in blood. So everybody's like, "Dude, are you okay?" And your response was the best, because he looks, he's like, "Oh, none of this is mine. Like this is legit, none of this is mine."
That's legit. That was it too. It was like, serious as a heart attack, not mine.
Not mine. Oh, geez. It's like you should see the other guy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And of course, that's over on Fight Society. If you want to go, the first episode of the Beast Brawl show, of course, clips on there if you still have the stomach for it. But so when you're not mauling people in McKeesport, tell me about getting into commentary. You know, you're teamed up with Jim LaMotta with Ryse with a Y. I believe you're also with the UpRyse as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've been to, and more recently, the first ever Angel Gate pay-per-view too.
Yes,
So,
and I'm going to be continuing to do color for Angel Gate.
excellent.
Moving forward. I had done some commentary back with the PWX TV. We had gotten to a point with the Wrong Crowd where, you know, we were the tag champs for so long, and, you know, we've run all the competition off and this and that, and the NWA we were working more and more with them, and, you know, our goal was to become the NWA champion, so we have no competition here, and until we get our shot, we're just going to go sit at the commentary table. So you can catch some of that commentary on the old TV. And I guess one night at Ryse, for some reason, the only commentator they had was Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandon, Brandon K, you know, Ryse's owner, who I trained in the business, he was like, "Hey, you used to do commentary, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, I used to do it." He said, "Would you like to sit in tonight?" "Sure, why not? I'll sit in." You know, and Jim and I just kind of clicked.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I mean, Jim is great to work with. I mean, he knows the business, he knows the wrestling, he knows the history, and he can throw up, you know, the softballs for me to hit them out of the park. And we just clicked so well on it. I was like, after Brandon had heard the program back, he's like, "That was astounding." He's like, "Would you work with Jim all the time?" I said, "Sure, I'll work with Jim all the time." It was great. It was fun,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So we just kind of progressed from there. So, and then they started with the UpRyse shows.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved over there, and then kind of
UpRyse is the kind of the I think in NXT for Ryse.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
a lot of newer talent getting opportunities.
it gives the younger guys an opportunity to get out there and work in front of a crowd, you know, and just you know, feel themselves into the business,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And yeah, the same thing kind of happened with Angel Gate, the last show, where, you know, they needed a commentator, a second guy, and of course we were live
Mm-hmm.
that night, so it's like, well, we got to do something that, you know, I mean, there's no fixing anything in post tonight, guys. So what do we do? Well, you know, Jim had said, you know, "Hey, Paul and I work so well together. Why don't we just do this?"
Yeah.
So we sat down and we did the show together, and yeah. And
Was
Jim
that-
actually made the comment afterwards. He goes, "You didn't know a single person in that ring that night." I said, "No, I'm really not familiar with a lot of these girls."
Yeah.
And he heard, you know, he listened back to the broadcast. He's like, "It sounded like we knew everything about every one of them." It's like, well, that's kind of what we wanted.
Had you ever done a live
Never.
commentary like that?
Never done
before?
a live. That was my first time doing a live, as it happened, commentary.
Wow.
So
You can check that out. The last couple episodes of Angel Gate as well. Hey, it's we're head up on an hour here, and I want to. There's a lot of great comments in the chat room, by the way. Love coming at you from Ron Hunt, from Brandon K. Thanks for making me a wrestler. I became. Thanks for making me the wrestler I became. My mentor. A lot of other guys giving love out there. If you want to check out the
and
chat,
I tell you what, a
afterwards.
lot of it back to. I mean, Brandon and Quinn especially. You know, I mean, out of all the people I trained, I believe they're the only two left in the business at this time.
Mhm.
And look at what they're doing. Each one basically runs their own company, and I couldn't be prouder of both of them.
Fantastic. So I'd like to end off on a little bit of a bigger question. What is the best and the worst of professional wrestling for you? Or what's the good and the bad of
The good and
professional
the good and the
wrestling?
bad. The good is, I mean, I've gotten to do a lot of things that a guy who's just north of 53 years old could never say they've done as a result of professional wrestling. And believe it or not, probably the worst is I'm still sitting here at 53 years old involved in this stuff, because once you get in, you never get out. You know, even my family's like, "What are you doing? Why are you still doing this?" Especially when it came down to doing this last match. They're like, "Are you insane? Why are you even out there?" So it's a disease. That's all I can say. To all you young guys, it's a disease, and you're never getting out.
Welcome to it. Well, hey, thank you so much. It's great to get to know you here over the last year or so and the last hour.
And it's been fantastic working with you guys. And I hope this relationship continues for a long time.
Excellent. There's great stuff going on there. Again, you can hear Paul's voice over on Ryse with a Y and UpRyse, as well as the Angel Gate shows between IndyWrestling.us and the Pro Wrestling Network at PWNetwork.com with Fight Society, of course, sometimes in ring and involved, and sometimes just making chaos happen. Online, where can people find you?
I do have a Facebook page, Paul Atlas. I am on Twitter at Paul Atlas. And I also have Instagram, Paul Atlas. So you can find me on social media pretty much on all three venues.
Go catch up with him. Thank you so much. And, of course, please check out everything going on WrestlingMayhemShow.com, IndyWrestling.us for past episodes like this. And, again, a lot of people we talk with, like Paul, featured on a lot of those sites, a lot of those shows on there as well. Thank you. And until next time, please support Indy Wrestling. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.